Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Good afternoon, Christine. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited for today's episode. I know we've talked about it before. It's spring here in Connecticut. It's beautiful weather. And so we still have to focus on what makes our business go and still think about today and tomorrow and 5 and 10 years out. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. How's Colorado for you today?
It's nice. We've got, in the evenings lately, we've had some beautiful thunder and lightning storms roll through, lots of rain, but during the day we're at like a 75 degrees sunshine. So, the summer is coming, and it's definitely been nice to get some sunshine, and everything is still green. So that's
everything's so green, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Favorite time of the year next to fall. Yeah, we have 90 degrees coming.
You have what?
90 degrees supposed to be here on Friday. People are already freaking out in Connecticut. So,
yeah, that's some heat.
All right. How's my mic sound? All right?
Yep, you sound good.
Awesome. All right. I did some adjustments on my mic, so it didn't sound so echoey. All right. So in today's podcast, we're going to talk about the 5 business strategic categories. And we're going to be discussing the importance of each of these categories, all 5 categories, and the 3 different stages that your business grows through. So we're going to be talking about the strategies and the stages of that. So, and what else, Christine? It's going to be...
Yeah, so this is such a big topic that we're going to be covering this in a 2-part series. So we want to make sure that not only do you tune in and listen through all the way through on this one, but tune in next week as well and listen to that episode, because in the end of that, we're going to be sharing, a giveaway that ties to these 5 different business categories and the stages that your business grows through.
2 episodes, 1 topic. Stay tuned for the next episode, and we're also giving away a special gift. So this is a big topic. This is our first double kind of episode on 1 topic for the podcast. So stay with us. You're going to learn a lot. It's a heavy lifting podcast. This is not for entertainment only. This is for something if you want to learn that's going to help you and your business grow. If you ever wonder what guys do who are successful and have bigger businesses and it just looks like they have newer mowers, that's not it. It's not the new mowers. They listen to stuff like this. They pay attention to it. They study it. My friends, these are the conversations that we have. And, I hang out with the top 10% of all landscape lawn care businesses. Those are my friends. This is the stuff we talk about. So it's not about mower blades. It's not about, is it this brand? Is it the red brand or the orange brand? That is for a certain level of business owner, which is fine. But if you want to go past what should I buy, red or orange? This is the podcast for you. So let's start, Christine.
Yeah, so first we're going to start about we're going to unpack these 5 business strategic categories and what are they. So 1 is strategic planning. So that's number 1, category number 1. Category number 2 is customer service. Number 3, operations. 4, revenue management. And number 5, everybody's favorite, employees.
Everybody's favorite is employees. I think, it's our biggest challenge is our employees, because we're not just natural born managers in the green industry landscape. We want to get stuff done. And, sometimes we don't think about how they feel about it, or, the relationship. We are focused on getting things done. And employees need more than that. They need more than just how to get stuff done. They're human beings who are living and struggling through life just like we are. So we have to have a little leniency, a skill, that little patience that we need to learn. So I'm glad we're going to be talking about that. But you can be strategic about how we manage our team and our employees and how we grow it and give our team opportunities for them to grow.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know strategic planning is one of your favorite topics. We talk about it frequently, and your number one strength and Clifton's strength is strategic.
It is. So, strategy is something I love. It really energizes me. I know some people, it might be exhausting. So, clients that we work with, they let me be the champion of the strategic planning side for them and kind of some of those strategic thinking and conversations. But it is one of my favorite topics. So I'm definitely more strategic than I am people-y. So.
So, with being in strategic business thinking, it's taking the time to define your business goals and objectives. So, why are you in business? What are you even doing this for? Like, what are you looking to get out of this? You're going to put a lot of time, effort, money, sacrifice. You're going to go without, give up things. Why are you doing it? Having that clear goal and the objectives is the very beginning of strategic planning.
Yeah, in the strategic planning process, it allows you to identify your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, threats to the organization, and it allows you to make informed decisions about the direction of your business. So, by investing in the strategic business planning, you'll have a better understanding of where your company stands and what steps it's actually going to take to reach your goals.
It's kind of like if you're going on a trip, you're going to plug in where you want to go. That's your goal, right? And you want to go somewhere, and how do you get there, right? So the objective isn't just to get there either. The objective is to get there with a certain quality of life and a certain contribution to your community. So we want to know where we want to go and how we're going to get there that serves the people we're with and our lifestyle. So we don't want to win at all costs and like look behind us at a trail of like broken, burned bridges and broken relationships. We want to make sure that we reach the goal, but on the way we're building a better world around us for our family, friends, community. And that's what being, strategic with your objectives means.
Yeah, and it also helps get your team on the same page. So if you're intentional about having a strategic business plan, you're documenting not just where are you going, but how are you going to get there? What are the expectations? It helps your team be on the same page. You guys can have conversations around this. So it really creates a core focus and a great foundation for everything else that we're going to be unpacking today. So that's why it's the number one category.
And if you can share it with your team and they know where you're going, like that helps, right? If you're getting someone's car, you kind of want to know where they're going and why they're going there and what's the meaning behind the trip. So if we just, work hard, get in the truck, work hard, that those days are over if you're trying to grow a business. People want to know where are we going, why are we going there, and who are we helping along the way.
Yep.
So what does that entail?
With strategic planning, what does it entail?
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of the things that you're going to include in your strategic plan is, and we go over some of this in our business accelerator Kickstarter workshop, which we talk about mission, vision, purpose, immutable laws, or also you may relate to them as core values, but immutable laws are deeper. They're the unbroken rules of what we live by. And then also we, dive into goal setting. And I think goal setting is a really challenging area for some business owners because they struggle with, well, how do I set up these goals and what are these milestones? And who is it who should be executing these? And I typically will find in working with the clients that we have worked with over the years is the business owner tries to be the champion of everything, and they're carrying their entire business on their back up this hill. And the rest of the company is just running around them like a bunch of crazy kids, right? So it's like it drives us crazy, it's overwhelming, and then we can't get what we really want done because we're trying to do too much at one time. So the goal setting process and strategic planning, like that's the foundation, that's where all the value lies, because it really helps us put things in perspective, and it allows us to create these goals and milestones to actually be achieved, and to figure out, like, what are we doing, when are we doing it, how are we doing it, and who do I need on my team to get this done. So I think those are a really important part of the goal setting exercise. And, like I said, we run through that in our accelerator program. And I love the process. We've gotten some great feedback from our clients to where their goals are so much more defined and they have focus and they can share it with their team.
Yeah, and we've seen it firsthand working with our clients when they go through the mission, vision, purpose, and immutable laws. Their demeanor changes, their tone changes, their motivation changes because they have so much more clarity about where they're taking their company and where they're taking their people, and also how the business is serving their life and the life of their family. And it's like, wow, this is a bigger opportunity than they ever realized, because they're like, if I reach this goal by being strategic and focused, this is what it's going to provide for my family. College, retirement, vacations. It's not about, a Ferrari and a third home. It's really about they want to take care of their family. I mean, that's really what they want to do. So that's where it starts. So the second.
Some of I just want to add this to it, is some of the other things that you would want to include in your strategic business planning is benchmarking, right? Knowing where have you been, what were your revenue, what's your your conversion rate, like all these things, what's your gross profit margin. So there's certain KPIs and key performance indicators that you want to track and include in your strategic planning. So then you can do things intentionally to maybe grow that revenue or improve that gross profit margin. So it really helps to know some numbers as well and track these and include them in your strategic business plan year after year, so you can measure and manage your growth and your improvement in your company.
As Dr. Richard Deming said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Right.
And that was 60 something years ago or longer. All right. Next is customer service. Customer service and satisfaction are paramount in keeping your customers happy and loyal. Without satisfied customers, it will be difficult to retain them and grow your business. I have found out in the lawn care business, if you want to grow, retention is the number one thing. You have to have a high renewal rate and a low cancel rate. Because if you're just adding customers all the time, they're coming in the front door, it's like having a bucket with a hole in it. They're going out the back door. There's no growth. So investing in customer service, training for your employees can make a significant difference in how customers perceive your business.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to customer service. And this is something that I myself experienced through my entrepreneurial journey, and just how I show up and connect, with the clients that I've worked with over the years. Is one of the things that I love to do is I love to educate the people that I work with and understand, what is it that they don't know? What is it that I know? And how can I help them understand, what I know? And not everything. Like, I don't want them drinking from the fire hose, but just little bits and pieces of knowledge that improves their experience, that helps them understand, like, why their numbers matter, why it's important to have a higher gross profit margin, what are some little tips and tricks that they can learn that will make the journey easier for them to grow and scale their business? So I think that there's a lot of opportunity in your customer service to where not only your team is taking really good care of your customers and you're creating, this consistency on how your services are delivered, but there's this other side of it to where we can educate the people that we work with and we service on how they can be successful in what they do and how we work with them. So it might be how much, I've heard you say this before, like let them know how much they need to water their lawn during different seasons. Several companies will let them know how much, how short they should cut their lawn or how short they shouldn't cut their lawn and what the damage will do. What are different varieties of weeds and what do we need to look for? So there's some educational pieces that you can put into your customer service process that can improve the relationship and the long-term loyalty with the people that you work with.
Yes, customer service we should fall in love with our customers, especially if they're our giant pumpkins and they're really our sweet spot customers, and make sure that we're taking care of them and helping them. It's the information that is helpful and just communication so they're not so disappointed, like how much to water your lawn and how high you should cut your grass and when you should water your shrubs. And hey, like right now we have a heat wave coming in. So, if they're watering and we have 90 degrees, guess what? This week, there's a good chance that a number of our customers are going to have a fungus that shows up. So getting that information out there via email, text, Facebook, however, or many different ways, but just communicate to people. And sometimes I've heard people say that we over communicate a little bit, but I would rather almost get 5 complaints from over communicating than 300 complaints because we never showed up for people. And so it's interesting. You just have to kind of pick your battles, but I have to serve as many of my customers as I can. And if 3 people didn't like the email or 5 people didn't like the email out of 3,000, then that's not a large enough data point to change. If it was over 100 people that were upset, now we have a conversation. But 3 to 5 people are not a large enough data pool. It's 0.1% ish. So make sure that you're serving the 99% of your clients. Absolutely. So the next strategic category is the day-to-day operations of your business.
Yeah, and the day-to-day operations, so this is the backbone of your company. So this includes everything from the product and service development to inventory management to customer support. So it's important to ensure that everything runs smoothly and efficiently to avoid waste and inefficiencies that can harm your bottom line. And in addition to this, I would also say that, and I hear this a lot, is how do I get the consistency dialed in of the service that we provide, because there's different people providing this service. So, I would say the day-to-day operations could also include like how you deliver your services, making sure everybody's on the same page of how you deliver it. What's the process, with product application, with maintenance, these different things that could come into play, and really practicing it with your team.
The day-to-day is one of the struggles getting out of the day-to-day that I talk to many people. And really it's about having that goes back to the strategic mission, vision, and purpose. Because if people understand like what we're doing here, why we're doing it, and why it matters and makes a difference, they'll figure out a way to do it. And you don't have to stand there and micromanage them and have these huge checklists to do everything. They know the mission. They will get it done. So I think a lot of the struggle that I've seen, people with the day-to-day management, whether they're actively engaged in the business or not even there, is having that clear mission, vision, and purpose. And then you will be amazed. I'm amazed when I watch my team step into that and say, hey, this wasn't, no one gave me this instruction, but this was the right thing to do for that customer at the right time. And I'm like, applauding them and thanking them for being aware of that. So it's interesting how that being strategic shows up in the day-to-day, every day. So uh, getting things to run smoothly, it starts with that mission, vision, and purpose. All
Mhm.
right. The next category is revenue management. It's another vital component of a successful business. Obviously, we have to manage our money, right? Understanding our numbers, such as income, expenses, it's very critical to make informed decisions about pricing and adjusting revenue, pricing, product offering, marketing campaigns. It's vital to track our financial situation and adjust our revenue management strategies to stay on track. And
Yes.
this could be two episodes of a podcast on its own, right? Business owners, most trade people, we love to do certain things. We love our trade. I was just talking to my mechanic this morning. He runs a very successful garage. It's him and three other guys. He is a mechanic. He was telling me he's not a business person, but he hired someone to run the upfront part of his office, an intake person and scheduler, because he wants to fix cars. That's what he loves to do. So part of the financial part is, I read 80% of small business owners do their own books. 40% of them are completely financially illiterate surrounding accounting and bookkeeping, because they're experts in doing lawn care, experts in mechanics, or expert masons. They're not. Don't put me in charge of QuickBooks. I'm part of the 40%. I don't know how to run QuickBooks at all. I know how to read reports, but I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm a report reader. I see the end results and translate that into tools that I can make decisions with. So revenue is one of those big components that people wrestle with until they get a professional involved.
Yeah, and I think, the benefits of getting a professional involved is not just having the structure of your chart of accounts set up properly so then the numbers can communicate clearly to you, but looking at that, like that's step one of revenue management, right? And then the next piece of that really comes into play, that strategic, is being able to look at those numbers when it comes to your revenue or your service offerings and decide what should you keep doing and what should you stop doing. Where are your profit centers in your business? And could you allocate resources to those? Can you do less work, create more revenue and more profit, and create capacity with your team? So there's a lot to that revenue management that we can really lean into as business owners and depend on if we have the structure set up right. And it makes the journey so much easier, and with informed decisions and being able to move forward and figure out where should we invest our time, where should we invest our dollars, and who are the right people that we need to be working with to do this.
Yeah, and it's worth paying a professional who knows what they're doing to help. I found with my numbers and my bookkeeping, so it's correct, it's right, and I'm getting the right data that I'm making decisions off of. It really hurts me on Facebook or these groups when I see people bragging about how little they pay for their tax account, and they're doing the books and they're on their own, because their business ends up staying very, very small. They end up being the workhorse forever because that's what they're focused on, saving a few dollars where they should be investing in that so they can grow their company. But they don't have the money to invest because they're still doing everything. And it's just this cycle that goes round and round and round. They don't want to hire a professional, so they get stuck doing everything. And they don't have the money because they don't charge right, and they don't know what their costs are, and they don't know how to invest, or they're buying the wrong whatever. So hiring a professional is really the first part of making sure your data is correct. And we know when we do profit first assessments, typically the biggest challenge, not just for us, but for all profit first professionals, is getting a correct chart of accounts. Their books are right. That's the biggest stumbling block. And, those, you can't save money there. That's not the place to save money, is in your books, having bad books, because that's the lifeblood of your business.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest places that we see an issue is, not just not being able to do a profit first assessment, but then having to let them know, we'll have companies come to us and they're like, oh, I have such a great bookkeeper, such a great accountant. And then we look under the hood and their books are in such bad shape. And, and I just want to tell them, like, you shouldn't be singing their praises. You should be upset about this. And you've been paying them how much for how long? And this is the outcome. And then we have to do a renovation to create clarity and structure the chart of accounts properly, and get things allocated properly. And it's, I typically say it's 8 to 10 times as much of what you originally paid to have the job done wrong in order for us to make it right. So it's a sad day for us when we have to sit there and go, hey, this is a mess. This is what we're going to have to do to fix it. But after you're done, this is where you're going to be, which is the upside. So let's focus on that.
Right. Absolutely. So get those books in good shape and make sure you're making decisions with correct numbers and ratios, which I love ratios and percentages. So having the right information helps me out quite a bit. And finally, the final and fifth category of strategic categories is people. Finally, building a great team. It's essential to the success of any business. By investing in your employees, you can gain motivated, productive, and committed staff. With the right team in place, you can achieve great things and take your business to new heights. Now, new heights doesn't mean a $100 million company. It could mean 2 more crews or 1 more crew or a good team member. Wherever you are now, it takes 1 person at a time to build that. But what's interesting is if you get 1 good person, then it's easier to get 2 good people. But if, 1 bad person does not make it easier to get 1 more good person. So make sure that when we build these teams, it's 1 good person at a time.
Yeah, and investing in your team. I know, Steve, you and I looked into what we invest in our team for continued education and development, and both of us hit around 3 to 4% of our revenue. We invest in our team and our team development and our team engagement. And I think there's something to be said there because over the years, we've been very familiar with our companies, each other's companies, our team members, how they've grown in their roles and positions. And one of the things that we found with our long-term employees is what we have invested in them and continuing to educate them. And I think that's an important piece. And it's just not, at the start where we onboard them, right? So there's some investment and training there. But I think coming up with a success path for your team, figuring out what do they want to focus on. Some team members are going to be stronger in areas than others. So someone might need 1 set of training, classes, and someone else might need something else. And then also the reboarding process for seasonal businesses is important. So investing in that training and practice of customer service, application, operations, the way that the company runs, just various things like that can be an investment in your team.
Yeah, and you invest heavily in your team. I invest heavily in my team. We have a 1,000-day development plan program in my company. And it lays out a track. They're going to do the people map to find out how they communicate, and then Clifton strengths, and then they're going to do leadership training and coach approach, and then find their why. And so we're always working to develop people because, there's a saying, well, what if I train my people and invest in them and they leave? Why I lose all that money? Well, the response has always been, right, well, what if they stay?
Yeah.
What if they stay and you don't invest and grow them? And the thing is, if you want to grow a company, your people have to grow along with it. So we're always investing in developing our people, and the onboarding and the reboarding is something that we're big fans of. And I think the statistics show that if someone is onboarded, onboarded correctly, they're 300% more likely to stay past 90 days. 300% more likely to stay past 90 days. So the way we used to onboard was get in the truck, we're going to work, show the guy how to string trim and off you go. And now we have a practice session and a observation kind of period of time and introductions and a best friend at work, so we're reducing all of that turnover. And we still have to hire people because we're growing or we're replacing people. But, now that we're way more serious about retention, it goes back to customers. I can't grow my business if I'm losing my customers. I can't grow my business if I'm losing my employees. So we got pretty serious about it in 2018 after already being in business for 30 plus years. So if it's your first year, you can start. If it's your 20th year, you can start, because people, gone are the days where it's easy to hire people and you can just get another pair of boots in the truck at the drop of a hat. That is gone. So we have to really build teams and focus on developing people for sure.
Yeah, it's a good investment.
They are good investments. I mean, we had a conversation about 2 months ago, and I was asking my team, how many kids are in your family? 2, 3, 2, 1. And, people don't have big families anymore. Yeah, I have one brother. I don't have 5 brothers, right? And so people don't go to church as much either, and they don't live in these tight neighborhoods. So people at work are family. And if we have a culture of that, it supports them in the challenges and struggles they're going to go through. People are going to have babies. They're going to get sick. People are going to get divorced. Their parents are going to pass away. We have to be there to support them. And if you have a culture of that, it creates this family, and people will gravitate to that mission, vision, and purpose and the company that takes care of their employees. So it's a new economy that is hard for certain people to recognize and deal with, and it's a struggle, but we're working to get there. So join us.
Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro. Yeah. And I love the connections that I have made with my team, over the years, and the connections they're making with each other, and the conversations that we have, to support each other when life is happening, right? And things come up. And I think it's important to have a team that's invested in the culture of the company. And it all stems from us being invested in them. And, it could be training, it could be conversations, it could be coming together as a team, with team parties or celebrations. There's lots of ways that you can invest in your team to build that culture and engagement.
Absolutely. All right. So at this point, we're going to start doing a little bit of a deeper dive into each of the strategic categories. And we're going to start with strategic business planning. So we're going to go a little bit of deep dive. I know I kind of jumped ahead. I caught Christine off guard a little bit when I asked her the question, because we knew we were going to deep dive later, but I wanted to lead about that mission, vision, and purpose, because it is so important in building a company. It is so important to building a great customer base and being a real leader, business leader in your community. So let's start with the strategic business planning in its infancy.
Yeah, so I kind of want to talk about like what are these three phases, right? So we have these different business categories that we focus on. And it's easy to break them down into five different categories, but then these categories go through these phases of like an evolution, right? And interestingly enough, like these different categories can exist at different phases. And what I mean by phases is there's three of them. There's infancy, adolescent, and maturity. So you can kind of think about it as like your kids. If you're a parent, and you look back at your kids, or maybe you're going through this now to where it's like you had an infant, there's this adolescent stage that they go through, and then there's this maturity stage. And each category can exist in its own development phase at the same time. So I think this is where the challenge comes into play for some of us, to where we're really good at our craft. There's other things we're not good at. And then it throws us off our game when we might have one of these categories, let's say strategic planning, is in an adolescent stage, but somehow or another, maybe our operations is mature. Like we just have a really good operating system in our business, but then our revenue management might be an adolescent. And then, we could have something else that is in an infancy stage. So this is where we want to spend a little bit more time diving into the different maturity phases. So infancy, adolescent, and maturity. So these growth phases your business goes through in these five different categories. And what does that look like? Like, what are some of the things that you might need to do as a business to move it on to the next phase?
So all right. So we have infancy, adolescence, and maturity, and they can kind of exist. They can coexist depending on which category that we're in developing. So like you said, maybe it's your day-to-day that you're really great at operations. So that's a maturity, but your strategic planning could be in adolescence and your financial could be in infancy.
Right.
And, I think that we can grow our business to a certain point with really focusing on that everyday, day-to-day deliverables. And then it gets to a point where, you got to be more financially focused, or have to be more strategically focused. And it just can't be, getting more work done. Selling more work doesn't solve, but yet creates more problems if we're not maturing. And then we wonder what happened. Like, well, it was so easy 10 years ago when it was just me and my three friends. And now all of a sudden I have 25 employees. And why is this so different? Yeah. Why is it so difficult? So, all right. So strategic business planning, infancy. We'll start there.
Yep. So we're going to talk about, strategic business planning, which is the first, stage of the business. So it could be infancy. So if you're in infancy, what are some of the things that you need to look at? So one is defining the company's mission, vision, and purpose. Like, what are their values, right? So making sure that you have that defined, because if you don't have that defined, then your strategic business planning it's still in infancy, because that is not checked off the list. And it's also conducting market research to understand customers' needs and preferences. So if we're just haphazardly approaching our market and providing services, and we don't really know what our customers need or what they want, then we're missing a step in our market research and our strategic business planning. The other one is identifying market trends and opportunities. So, you open up a business, you're looking at your market, you might be in an area where lawn application could be, needed and wanted, as well as landscape services and design, because there's not a lot of people offering this in your area, but there's a lot of demand. So really taking the time to look at your market trends and opportunities. And it's not just a one-time thing, but continuing to track those. What do people want? What's the demand? What are they looking for now? One summer they might be looking for, indoor outdoor rooms. Another summer it might be pools that are popular. Maybe it's a patio, to where lots of people want patios. So, the market goes through different trends. And then developing a business plan and establishing initial goals and objectives. And then these are things you want to update year after year. So once you get them established and identified, you want to review these 4 things every year. So you want to take time to review your company mission, vision, and purpose, your market research, your services, the trends that are happening, and then updating that business plan and your goals that support those.
So, Christine, so when you say take time, do you mean like 2:30 on a Tuesday, February 8th or something like that, right? Who do you meet with? Like, who should, if I'm going to do this, like, do I do this alone? Do I do it with a group? How do I get support? Who's going to ask me the tough questions? Who's going to mentor me through this?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, connect with somebody. A coach is good, a financial advisor, somebody who specializes in this. This is one of the reasons why we put together the Business Accelerator Kickstarter workshop, because this is exactly what we focus on. We're finding that there were so many businesses that had been in business for 20 plus years, and even at revenue of $3 to $5 million and just doing really good in their market, but they didn't have this basic infancy step done when it came to their strategic planning, and it was missed opportunity. And then once we brought them through the workshop and they got this in place, we could see the traction that they were finally gaining, and it wasn't so hard. So I would say, find a workshop, a coach, an advisor, somebody who specializes in this. And then also I would say, if you have a team, invite some of your team leaders in to help you work on these things and get their perspective and support. So it's not just the business owner trying to get their strategic business planning out of the infancy stage in their company.
Absolutely. Bring your team on board. And, I always, for 20 something years, I always met with a group of other landscape owners, and we would work on our goals and, our strategic planning for the year. The challenge was we would only see each other once a year. So it was very helpful. But, I would really encourage people to at least visit this quarterly with their team. And if you have, coaching like we offer, coaching other people offer, but do it every quarter and meet with your team. You don't have to carry the ball the whole way. You don't have to be the hero on everything. And I, for 30 years, I kind of wore the Superman business owner cape. I'm so tough. I could do everything. I'm the best at everything. And I really learned that I was not. My team is so much better at so many things than I am. But it's such a relief. And when I gave up my cape, my super person cape, is when my business really grew. It's when it really took off. And it gave me a whole nother lifestyle. By getting out of my own way, my own ego, my own Superman mentality, mindset, my company and my whole lifestyle changed. So I would encourage you, meet with a group, meet with a coach, meet quarterly, get out of your own way if you can, and let your team carry the ball. These, people complain about millennials or Gen Zs. I love my millennials and Gen Zs on my team because they are savvy, they're smart, they're ambitious, they want to move the needle, and they will dive in, roll their sleeves up, and get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that too. It's, we have a mix of different generations on our team, and every one of them brings something different to the table and support each other. And I really love seeing how they collaborate and work together and get stuff done. So definitely bring your leadership team in to help support you in moving through these different stages.
And I really think it goes to this mission, vision, or purpose. If you have that clearly defined mission, vision, or purpose, people show up for it. If nobody knows why they're there, where they're going, or what it's about, people don't show up. Why would you? Why would I? Why would I? Why would you? Right? If there's no mission, vision, or purpose, it's kind of like you know what you get? People show up for a paycheck and they do the minimum. They're not problem solvers. They're not strategic thinkers. They're just getting a paycheck. All
Yeah,
right.
and one of the things that comes to mind is whenever I'm in a place, which this is very rare, but somebody turns to me and says, "Why are we here?" or "Why are we listening to this?" I know we have a problem. And and especially if they're asking me. So it's like if they're turning to me and they're going, "Why are we here? Or what are we doing?" Then I know we have a problem, whether this is at a conference, a gathering, a professional group setting, whatever it is, then I'm like, okay, Houston, we have a problem.
I can 100% relate to that. I
Yes.
can 100% relate to that. Yes. And I think, you'll see people, and when I don't have that clear mission, vision, and purpose, it actually creates anxiety for me. So I crave it. So I can relate to how my team must feel or other people must feel if they don't have a mission, vision, and purpose of why and what it's
Yeah.
about and who
Yeah.
it's
I
about.
always need to know, like, what are we doing? So
Yeah.
as long as I know what we're doing, then I can be, in on what we're doing. But if I don't know, then I'm very hesitant to move
Yeah.
forward.
It's hard to commit.
So our next stage is adolescent. So, this is going to be the next stage of growth. So moving from infancy to adolescence. So what are the things that we're looking at in this stage? So one of them, and we kind of talked about this before, but it's reviewing and revising the company's mission, vision, purpose, and immutable laws or core values. So as a company grows, things change. So the customers that you serve may change. You might be serving and really hoping you're serving better customers and more of your ideal customers. Your team members' perspectives may change because as you're growing as a company, so are your team members. What the business needs on a regular basis is going to change. So this is where if you're being intentional to review and revisiting these mission, vision, purpose, these goals, then you're in the adolescence stage. And then this ties in with this. So some of you might heard of a SWOT analysis, which is a strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis. So conducting some sort of SWOT analysis, that's a really good thing to do on an annual basis as well. So you can see where are your strengths in your business? What are your weaknesses, your opportunities, and threats? And this is a really great thing to pull into your business strategic plan as well. And it is a higher level of strategy, is being aware of these things.
So we're going to do the SWOT analysis, and then we're going to identify our weaknesses, which is easy, but sometimes opportunities are hard to identify. Threats sometimes can be easy to identify, but then there's other threats that we never predicted, like when diesel went up to $6.40 a gallon in Connecticut, or COVID, or how difficult it is to attract hire new employees. That's a threat to a lot of businesses. But then the next is identifying competition, identifying areas for improvement, developing and testing new products and services, expanding into new markets and new customer segments. That's a more in the adolescent stage. And we try and test products and services, and 80% of the time we don't ever move forward with them, because what's interesting is everything is more complicated and more difficult to implement, and it costs more money than we originally think. Like, oh, that's easy. All you do is just spray this thing. And then you're like, oh, I'll give you a deer spray, for example. Okay, just spray this deer spray on these shrubs, right? No problem. Protects the deer all winter. The deer aren't going to eat this. How hard can it be? Well, it has to be sprayed when it's warm, because if it's too cold, you have to keep it in the truck. And if it gets cold in the sprayer, it jams the whole sprayer up. If it gets on any part of the house, sidewalk, driveway, siding, window, it's almost impossible to get off. It has to melt off with heat. because it's a horticultural wax. And then it discolors the shrubs a little bit. So people call about that. So, it goes from a simple spray the shrubs to, clean the sidewalk, clean the siding of the house. You have material that gets clogged up and the guy can't continue. So, check and just offer a very limited amount of services for expanding into those.
Yeah, and through this phase, in the adolescence phase, I really feel like this is kind of getting that muscle, that strategic muscle worked out to where it's easier for you once you establish a foundation of the things we outlined in that infancy stage to move into that adolescent stage because you're reviewing what you've already put in place. So you're revisiting, your mission, vision, and purpose. You're looking at your SWOT analysis, again, looking at those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. You're getting that in place. You're analyzing your competition. You're deciding whether or not you should provide a new service because you're already dialed into your market and their needs. And then you might find the opportunity to expand to a new market or new route or new area. And what does that look like? So it's really being intentional versus reactive or just coming in and going, hey, team, guess what? I have this great idea. We're going to expand to this whole new market, this whole new area, and we're going to do it in the next 2 months or 3 months. So your team will appreciate you as a leader when you're intentional about this and you're not in that infancy stage of your strategic planning.
I've walked in and said that very thing. We're going here. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah. So we tested a few things and I like to test, but I also like to go. So I can put the cart in front of the horse sometimes. That's why I like testing and reeling it back in and reevaluating.
And that's probably why you surround yourself with strategics, because we say, hold on, here's the 10 holes you're going to fall in if you take that next step.
It's exactly why I have inadvertently surrounded my whole life with strategics. One of my good friends, one of my best friends, Jill, texts me while we're on this, and she's strategic number one too. My wife's strategic. Jill is strategic number one in her talent, but she's strategic also. My wife's strategic number two. My chief operating officer is strategic. Some of my other good friends are strategic. So I need these people to point out all the holes and potholes because I'm the go guy. Let's get it done. And but that's why you need a team. All right. The third part of strategic business planning is maturity. And this is evaluating the company's overall performance and financial health, revisiting the mission, vision, and values to ensure they are still relevant, consolidating and optimizing operations and processes, diversifying the product or service mix, identifying opportunities for innovation, and adopting new technologies. And then finally, establishing a long-term strategic plan for sustained growth and profitability.
Yeah, and I love these phases in maturity in the strategic planning because it really is, that solid foundation with some great pillars there to support it, from the, mission, vision, and purpose being in place, looking at your financial health, making sure that what your services are that you're providing and the opportunities that surround them, and bringing it into systems too. So adopting new technologies. I love innovating with technology and streamlining and automating things in a company. It creates capacity for a team, it creates profitability, and it creates efficiency. So all of those are just beautiful words to me when I'm looking at like innovation and technology. And the technology these days, I know that there's softwares out there that support small businesses and the trades industry, and they're really thinking about what they can do to support you in automating the systems in your business, creating consistency, and supporting not just your team but great customer service. So these are all areas of maturity with your strategic planning.
And I like that, making sure revisiting the mission, vision, and values to make sure they're still relevant, because things change. I mean, it's not the same world that it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago. So what's relevant today wasn't maybe not as relevant as it was, 30 years ago. So you have to kind of stay, you can't just stay in one place. Things change. Identifying innovation and adopting new technologies, that can be a challenge, but you have to step into it slowly sometimes, but other times you have to take a big leap. And, buying a computer was a big leap in 1991. With Dell 386, 89, I'm sorry. That was a big leap of technology. And there's a guy I follow on Facebook. He mows alone. It's very interesting. He brings two mowers. If he has to run the mower, he runs one. But he has another mower that mows remote, and he's string trimming while this mower is cutting fields and cutting yards. He sets it up. So, I mean, talk about technology. He can run two mowers, and then he can do the string trimmer, and he's only on one of them. The other one is all digital. It's all electronic. So, I mean, talk about, that is technology. Plus the software that these companies like Field Routes and WorkWave and Service Titan have. They're always coming up with new ways to help people be more efficient, quicker, faster, easier. Awesome.
Yeah, and I love learning about, the innovative technologies that they're coming out with in this industry. And I think one of my favorite conferences to go to is the Lawn and Landscape Technologies Conference. And because they have so much there that they share on technology and educating you on the process and what it looks like, and even companies that implemented it. So I absolutely loved going to that conference and connecting with those people and having, conversations around innovation and the technologies coming out. Like, what's next? How can we improve this process? And it really is focused on creating more profitability and capacity in a company. So all of that's really, really interesting to me.
And the last one we mentioned, establish long-term strategic plan for sustained growth and profitability. How far out is sustained? How far out is long-term?
Yeah, so it's at least a 5-year to a 10-year plan. And when we do goal setting in our workshop, that's something that we focus on is, what's your 5 to 10-year plan? And I know for some business owners, and I know this because, my partner over at Core Growth Strategies shared this with me, like she's really good at, kind of putting the pieces together, but she really relies on me with that long-term focus and those goals and painting that picture. And that's one of the reasons why we work so well together. And, two of my strengths are future and focus. And, you bring strategic in there. And then it's like we have a full-on, game plan going. And I can let you know what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, how it's going to turn out, what the end game is, how we're going to get there. So it's really easy for me to put that together. But for others, it can be very challenging to look at that long-term growth and figure out, what does that look like? What are the goals I have to set up? What does that mean? And really look that far out in the future.
It is very difficult when you say 5 years and 10 years, and I like to break it down to 5 years is 1,825 days. So what's 1,000 days look like? And then what's 100 days look like? And what does 500 days look like? And where do I have to be? And what are the milestones? Like, if I want to add another 1,000 customers in 5 years, what's the milestone year 1? Year 2, year 3, year 4, and just start doing the math. How many people do I have to put on? What's the retention rate going to be? So if I know my average spend per acquisition of a new customer is $200, how much money am I going to have to spend in marketing? And break it down by the numbers, and that helps me to find my way through that 1,825 days, being really strategic with like how to get there, where are we going to land, what's the resource and input that it's going to take, and how is that going to serve me? Like adding another 1,000 customers, how does that change my life? How does that change the life of my team? because if I can paint how it's going to change my life and affect my family and team for the better, I have so much more motivation and traction achieving it. So you do what helps you, though. You have to do what helps you get through it. Some people want to do it month by month, and that's awesome too. It's just whatever works for you. And if it's, high futuristic and strategic, that's awesome. But if it's, you need to break it down a little bit more, that's awesome too. Yeah. All right. So we have covered quite a bit. We did the agenda. We got through the strategic business planning. And on our next episode, which is going to be the very next podcast we release, we're going to go and continue part 2 of our strategic planning and our strategic categories, which are going to be, the next one is going to be customer service. Then we're going to go over revenue management. We're going to go over day-to-day production, operations, and finally finishing with people. So join us on the next episode as we continue this path of strategic categories.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.